I'm Andy,
I'm Drew.
and this is Spork.
Spork. So this week on Spork, we are going. This will be our second Michael Jordan episode, right?
Yes.
First one around baseball.
Yep.
And I think it's kind of a twist on at least the what if scenario that I've always kind of heard about or that you commonly think of, where instead of goes back to his draft day, but instead of the Blazers picking Michael Jordan over Sam Bowie at the time, who ended up having a less than successful career compared to Michael Jordan. There's actually a scenario floated out by Hakeem Olajuwon, I think in his autobiography that was like released in 96, right around when they went back to back. And it was that the number 2 pick in the draft was offered with Clyde Drexler to Houston for Ralph Sampson. And Portland was trying to get a big guy, which is why they ultimately took Sam Bowie. And I think that I don't know how close this ever was coming to fruition. It sounds like there was at least some outlines of a conversation had, whether or not it was ever going to actually take place. But Houston had Ralph Sampson and took Olajuwon to kind of have their twin towers to try and break the NBA. I think they made it to the finals in mid 80s, right? 86, 87.
I believe.
So instead of having those two with Sampson and Hakeem the Dream, they could have potentially set up a Hakeem Olajuwon, Michael Jordan, Clyde Drexler, young, talented team that we're going to discuss.
Yeah. It's really interesting with this one, too, that, with Hakeem and Jordan, in the same draft, that even the fact that Houston might have considered, drafting 1 and 2 with the future, basically building their future all in one day. It's like building a core knowing that you have 2 sure things coming out of a draft, which is pretty unusual. I feel like a lot of teams would not even consider that, and more or less want the balance between the old and the new.
Yeah, there's always you think of especially in that era, you kind of have the young guys coming in, the old guys going out, whether it's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Magic Johnson or Robert Parrish, Larry Bird. And, there's always kind of this changing of the guard that's, kind of happening where you have the veteran leadership that's kind of got you there and then the handoff. Whereas, this is almost, kind of like a Oklahoma City Thunder, right? With Durant, Westbrook, and Harden, where you have 3 young, talented guys that all go off and, have individually successful careers, and eventually Drexler and Olajuwon win 2 titles together, kind of say 10, 11 years into their careers. But yeah, I think it would have really kind of reshaped a lot of narratives, really for both of these players. And, I think there would be some fit potential issues between Drexler and Jordan, which is why Portland didn't take him. But I think with 2 guys that talented, you probably find a way to make it work.
And so with this, right, like I think there's definitely multiple angles that we can look at this. The future for Houston, obviously the future with Portland, and then just, the whole side effect of what happens to Chicago. Not to mention the individual careers of everybody. And honestly, the first thing I thought of is like, how quickly could Houston have had success if this scenario played out? Just knowing, hey, you have 2 guys, 2 rookies, right? And Clyde Drexler, who is either, I think it was the 84-85 season, he was like number 2 in the sixth man of the year voting.
Yeah.
But so I started to go back and I was like, okay, well, Jordan was the rookie of the year his first year, I believe, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And Hakeem, I think he averaged over 18 points. I think he averaged a double double his rookie year. And Clyde Drexler being, you know, second in that six man voting. I mean, that core right there is going to win some games just based on individual statistics alone in a
Yeah.
playoff team right out the gate.
Yeah. Well, and another interesting wrinkle is where Olajuwon and Drexler already have history playing in college together.
Yep.
And, they ended up losing to Jordan's Tar Heels in, I think it was 82. So it was I think it would have been, I'd say, an interesting dynamic knowing that those two have kind of a pre-existing relationship and knowing kind of the prickly exterior that Jordan sometimes had,
Sure.
if it ended up kind of putting two camps there already, right? Pitting them against each other.
Yeah. I mean, it would be, I'm sure that it would be an interesting dynamic. The thing is, and I honestly, shame on me, I don't know as much about Hakeem's, personality, but I would assume that he's a very competitive guy. Just being, I feel like players who are better or just as good or better defensively than offensively tend to have a little bit of an edge to them. And knowing how competitive Jordan was, especially on the defensive end, I could see them being a pretty physical team. And maybe they would have a little bit of that history from college that could cause a little bit of a rift. I think they ultimately could get past that, just knowing that they all kind of want that. Maybe
Yeah.
they're not just into the individual part of the game.
Yeah. And, I think just based on, I'll say, kind of perceived attitudes post playing career, I don't know that. And yeah, like to your point, I don't know what Hakeem was like day in and day out in the locker room and as a teammate, but he performed at a very high level. But he doesn't seem like he's got that same Shaq Barkley type demeanor, right? That I feel like could rub somebody like Jordan the wrong way. I think he's a very professional, almost Tim Duncan like.
Yeah, it's a good comparison, at least how I see things on the surface, for
Yeah.
sure.
So, but yeah, I think with them, I think, just kind of getting back to what you started, how quickly they have success. I think they probably still make that 86 finals. And I think they probably have a pretty good shot of starting a pretty big run, almost like say, kind of the Celtics from the 70s to 80s, where it was like every other year championship type run that they were in.
For sure. And now, I guess, looking at the kind of the negatives with this team is that, ultimately Jordan was like, he was the face of basketball, the logo. I mean, he
Mhm.
was the guy in Chicago.
Yeah.
He had to drag that team to success for several years. And with this team, he doesn't have to do that. During this era, I mean, we're looking at the big guy. The big man was like coveted. That was, everybody wanted the center, and that was the star. And I don't know if Jordan is the star, at least not for a while, in on this team. I think I don't know if he necessarily cared if he was a star as long as he was winning, but I still think, like, kind of revisionist history and knowing how successful he was with his brand, I don't know if he is the brand that early on in his career.
Yeah, and I think being in Chicago and having kind of a solo spotlight, I think it helped the whole Nike persona and kind of let that take on a life of its own. Whereas if he's potentially not even the biggest superstar on his own team. Yeah, I don't know that takes off the same way. And, it's kind of a weird scenario to compare it to, but I wonder if it almost ends up being a little like Shaq and Kobe-ish, where, you have granted they're drafted at the same time. So it's not like a young upstart guard that comes in, but Olajuwon he's a polished player coming out of college and he hits the ground running. Not to say Jordan doesn't, but there's a different playing style where Olajuwon is, I'll say, more effective early, whereas Jordan he's getting stats, but he's not taking over the playoffs yet, right? Because he's just not. He can't drag his team there. Whereas centers, it seems like in that era, were, I guess, more of a focal point. If that makes sense, kind
for
of
sure.
how I'm
Yeah.
rambling here.
No, I agree. And I think what Jordan would love though is like I kind of mentioned how the defensive side of this a little bit, but it's like Jordan was a fantastic defensive player,
Yeah,
and Hakeem was one of the best like of all time, you know. And if Jordan doesn't have to lock in every second on defense, like could he be even that more effective on offense? Which
yeah,
is crazy to think because he was amazing,
yeah.
in all
I
those
mean,
respects. But it's like he could probably get out and run, and that's saying something because of how good offensively he was without that luxury.
yeah, and I guess to maybe put some of their accolades in perspective of what all three ended up doing. You look at just, we'll say, first All Stars. So Drexler was 10 times, Olajuwon 12, and Jordan 14. So a lot of those. I was trying to do the math there. So 26 plus 10, so 36 between them. MJ was a Defensive Player of the Year in 88. Olajuwon had 2 Defensive Players of the Year in 93 and 94. He was all-time or all-defensive first team for 5 years. Jordan was first all-defensive team 9 times. Drexler not so good on defense, but he doesn't need to be. So, well,
Yeah,
not accoladed on defense. I'm sure he did just fine. So,
I think it's probably just fine. Yeah, yeah.
and that's not even counting the championships. I mean, Clyde had one, the second one with Houston. Then Olajuwon had 2 there, and then obviously Jordan had the 6. So, there's an 8-year run where either Jordan or Hakeem were NBA Finals champions and NBA Finals MVPs.
Now, and I want to go before we wrap up this episode. I do want to like go back to that draft a little bit, just because there's some interesting stats I saw from those players. But now I don't know. Did you have much on like what
No,
Portland's future look like?
I just assume it's kind of ends up the way it goes for them
Yeah,
with Sambo. It's Ralph Sampson had some issues. I think in this scenario, they probably tried to do what Houston was trying to do and do a twin tower kind of thing, maybe.
now
I
now
Well, they don't have the pick.
I was gonna say so. Sam Bowie probably
So
isn't on the
Chicago goes to
team.
Sam Bowie.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of looked at it as like, oh, that team is they're probably about the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, they lose Clyde Drexler, which stinks, but it's yeah, I would say they're about the same. I don't think much changes there other than they might crash a little bit sooner
Yeah.
than what they ended up doing. But like you mentioned Sam Bowie going to Chicago, so it's like Chicago is probably like the biggest loser in
Yeah.
all of this, because it's like if Portland's history doesn't change, Chicago certainly does. Like Chicago goes from riches to rags,
Yeah.
and it kind of it's so hard to even picture what that looks like, knowing how dominant they were with
Yeah.
Jordan.
Well, and they're not a team. I mean, they spent some money to bring in players around Jordan once Jordan had proven what he was, but they're not a team that's going to build through free agency. It's a team that gets, I don't want to say lucky in the draft with Michael Jordan, but any draft pick I feel like requires some sort of luck to go with it. Otherwise, I think they're just a middling franchise for a long time. And
Yeah,
I don't see, say things don't work out and, after 6, 8 years, Jordan's hitting free agency in the early 90s. I don't think Chicago is a possible destination, right? It's probably New York. Maybe he goes to the Knicks, or maybe he goes Phoenix, or Philadelphia or the Lakers. I'm just spitballing random places at this point, but
yeah. I mean, honestly, to like, if I was trying to think about like a best case scenario for Chicago in this, and it's like, do they go against this maybe conventional draft order with Sam Bowie and Sam Perkins, and you skip over them and Charles Barkley? It's like, okay, that Charles Barkley was a superstar.
mhm.
That's maybe like best case scenario for Chicago is like if they reached past the two Sams
Yeah,
and picked him, it's like, okay, well, at least you have Charles coming in
yeah,
and maybe build around him a little bit. I think because I think his game would have translated regardless of who he
yeah.
played with.
Yeah, I do wonder just kind of because he was undersized, even then for the
Yeah,
position, and knowing how much height was favored back then. Granted, they took Michael Jordan, so, maybe they were okay thinking outside the box, and maybe that fits into them taking Barkley there. I think that would have at least kept them more relevant than the alternative, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, they're not you know reeling for a decade. Maybe they are. I don't know. There's been plenty of really good players on really bad teams, but honestly, I think that's the best case scenario for Chicago is if they make that reach. And I guess that adds to the whole what if
Ye
scenarios.
Yeah, I don't see Barkley's career playing out any differently,
No.
unfortunately for him.
Yeah, unfortunately for him. I mean, he's still probably on TV
Yeah,
later on, so
yeah, and and I think with this super team that we made in Houston, if everything works out the way we think it potentially could, they're a dominant team for 12 years, give or take, at least through that, like, 96 season. So if you have that, I mean, nobody's really winning championships. I mean, egos are gonna get involved at some point, and coaching has to play some role in it, I would assume. Maybe Phil Jackson doesn't become the shooting guard whisperer, I guess I should say, instead of MJ.
yeah, it's true. Maybe not. I so yeah, I love like going back and looking at just like the full drafts
Yeah.
and seeing how things could play out. In like the first round of this draft, I didn't go too much further after. Yeah, I'm scrolling down now, but it's like the first round had some like crazy draft picks. I mean, you have Hakeem, and sorry, and where I'm going with this is the longevity of some of these careers, like years, minutes played,
Yeah.
total points. It's like Hakeem, 18 years, over 44,000 minutes, which is more than Michael Jordan, you know.
Yeah.
But then like Sam Perkins, like he played 17
Wow.
years. Charles Barkley, 16 years. Otis Thorpe, he was the number 9 pick, almost 40,000 minutes. He played 17 seasons. Kevin Willis, 21 years. I mean, and then you go down John Stockton, 19 years, almost 48,000 minutes. Like, these guys played forever. And because I was sitting there thinking, like, okay, well, any draft with MJ is gonna, statistically, the best, right? But it's think about just like
You had to go to minutes played for him to not be leading one of the categories in the draft.
Yeah, obviously he had he had a couple years in baseball, but it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you had some big guys in here who played really a long time,
Yeah.
which I thought was pretty impressive.
Yeah. No, I feel like that's the way NBA drafts kind of are. You get these drafts every decade or so where it's just chock full of talent.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's almost, like in this case, it's fun to take the chess pieces from that draft and play with them a little bit just to see what crazy scenario you can come up.
Yeah, for sure. There were a couple people picked in the first round of this draft that did not play much or very long, but we won't disparage their names today. But
So I guess kind of going back and thinking about, I'm going to put you on the spot. So total championships, where do you think that ends up?
for Jordan or for Houston,
Let's do Houston first and then Jordan second.
I'll say 5 with Houston, and because I really liked the Tim Duncan comparison there.
Yeah.
In the Spurs, it's kind of like, okay, get the really talented guards with the really awesome big man. Like, it just seems to fit.
Yeah.
And
So
then,
I'm assuming this is in the first like 7 to 9 years, something like that.
I think it starts in year 2.
Okay. So that would be the 86 season when they made it. So then you're taking away, we'll just say potentially the Pistons back to back in 89-90, and then 2 Lakers championships, 87-88, where I think one of those is where Magic Johnson plays center, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the Celtics, and then at that point we start getting into Jordan's run with the Bulls. So just trying to keep in context, where the league's at is where as you're getting ready to make your next move with Jordan.
So, yeah, I think there is a point, we'll say year 10 for Jordan. So maybe around the time he goes and plays baseball. We'll say that. And it's like he plays baseball. We'll leave that in
Yeah.
in the history books there. But when he comes back, I think he makes a change. I don't think he goes back to Houston.
Space Jam probably might not get made. Throw that back in there.
Man, yeah, that's wild. Okay, well, and then he comes back, and let's say he goes somewhere. I think he goes somewhere dominant because like I keep thinking like he wants to be the hero like what he was in Chicago, but he wasn't that his whole career. I mean, he was, but he had more talent later in his career, so I don't think that was as important to him as long as he was winning. So I'm going to say that they find a way to get him on the Lakers, and he wins with the Lakers.
Yeah, I was looking at, so when they signed Shaq in 96, which is right about the time that you're talking about here, that was basically the biggest free agency signing and kind of ushered in this new market, right? Because it was a $120 million deal, really kind of the first of its kind in the free agency side of things. But, because Jordan had signed I think it was a $30 million deal in 96, and he kind of had these pretty large contracts later in his career. But yeah, I think they're the ones with money, and then all of a sudden, I think you're looking at a fallout of they probably can't sign Shaq and Jordan. And if they have Jordan, they're not taking Kobe Bryant in 96. So your fallout has just gotten insane.
But yeah, I mean it's falling quick. I mean, could you imagine if Jordan was like, I'm coming out of baseball retirement, and now I have another dominant big man that I get to play with, right out the bat. Like, I mean, that team could have been insane as well, or at least just with those two guys.
You mean you're saying they get Shaq and it's Shaq and MJ?
I mean, I'm not.
It's not your money.
It's not my money. Whatever luxury taxes or whatever they had to pay. I don't know. I don't know what all the rules were back then, but let's just, for the sake of of fun, you know. Let's throw him on the Lakers 10 years in.
All right. And then he wins, what, 3 more there? Or?
I'm going to go with 2 because you talk about personalities.
Yeah.
I think they win 2, and then I think one of them leaves. But I think that's when it stops for both of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Nah, I think that's a fair assessment of a potential timeline there. It seems like that checks out. The only other one, I feel like the Knicks were always around there. I feel like that could have been a possibility. But outside of that, I don't feel like there was a lot of big spending teams, right? Yeah, the money's not the way it is now. So just trying to run through my head if there's anybody else that jumps out. But yeah, I don't think so. Maybe the Celtics, but again, they're more of a build smarter, not pay more type franchise, I feel like, especially at this point. But yeah, maybe Rick Pitino, is he there in 96, right? Maybe he's fallen in love with him and trying to spend every dollar he's got.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he decides to go to the Nets.
I assume that's a joke.
You know,
I don't think they were spending money at that time, were they?
probably not.
So, all right. Anything else we didn't cover on this? Yeah, I think ultimately Clyde Drexler probably becomes a version of Scottie Pippen, right? But
Yeah.
better, worse, similar. I think he kind of fits that role pretty well.
Yep. Agreed.
But yeah, I feel like the whole comparison to Jordan isn't the same. If he's always got a Hall of Fame center, that's kind of on his team. I guess the one thing when we talked about the 5 championships, NBA Finals MVP, how many of those are split between the 2 of them?
Yeah, definitely split.
Yeah.
3 and 2. And I don't know who's who.
And you think probably, Jordan might average 30 a game, but Olajuwon's probably like 20 and 20, right?
Oh yeah, for
And
sure.
it's going to be hard to really, you're splitting hairs at that point. It's probably whoever has the bigger finishing game and, kind of sways opinion the most at that point. So,
Yeah, like a game 7 and just whoever plays best then gets it.
It's going to be, I was going to say it. I think would be hard to push this team to a game 7, but yes.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think that covered everything I had here.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I think Houston, probably would love to see this happen. And in retrospect, whoever declined that trade down there, I probably wish they would have talked a little longer, right?
Exactly.
So, all right, we'll call it there. And that's a wrap for today. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share, and be sure to tune in next time.